what we did is we helped build out an assessment that's based on values. Values are more reliable, and there's all these different studies and science developed on how and what you value can determine with high 92% plus percent accuracy the behaviors that you bring to the table. And we were able to start measuring behaviors.
Coaches, welcome back to the podcast. Excited to have Ryan Schachtner with me today from Success Beyond Game Day. Ryan, thanks for joining me, and I'd love to start off and just have you share a little bit about your journey in sports with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Luke, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here and to kind of share a little bit about me and the journey that I've taken since being a washed up, retired college baseball player. I almost went to Auburn, stayed home in Wisconsin, and ended up blowing out, like a lot of athletes, like a career-ending injury. Right, blew out my shoulder the last game of my freshman year, and that was a career ender for me. And so, like most athletes, whether it's on their terms or not, their career is done, and you're just sitting there wondering, all right, now what next? And so I went through that just like a lot of athletes, and ended up, getting into the finance space and started a financial planning firm. Moved from Wisconsin to Charlotte in 2003, and really got lucky and worked with a lot of athletes. But I always laugh. It was never when they had that, like the $300 million max guaranteed contracts, right? It was always like recovering, an athlete that made a bad choice or was led astray. And so it was rebuilding back up. And so I spent 25 years doing that, and working with athletes and building a firm in the Southeast. And but yeah, it was all stemmed from baseball and having that love of being around sports and wanting to help, not really wanting to let go, but being forced to.
Yeah, wow. There's a couple things I want to ask you, a couple follow-up questions on there. The first is about your injury. So you're a freshman year of college, you're playing college baseball, living out your dream, blow out your shoulder, ends your career. Talk to me about what that was like as a player. And then also, because there's coaches listening where they've had that happen to a player, or they're going to have that happen to a player that they're coaching and leading. And I'd just be really curious to know what was the support from your coach like when that happened? Was there anything that you would wish your coach would have done differently, or that you would advise coaches to do when they are working with an athlete that's in the spot you were in?
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions. And so, I would say from a coaching, I didn't get much support, right? And I don't know that I blame the coach, because they have a job to do. They have to, I mean, their job is to recruit the next best player, and that means recruit someone that was better than me, right? And so they need to move on. They've got games to play. They've got to keep on. And so, I understand kind of the angle that a lot of them take of, like, yeah, I'm no longer useful to the program athletically. And so, yeah, there wasn't a ton of support, and it was challenging. Whether it's injury or you go out on your own terms, like a Tom Brady, or all of a sudden you played your 4 or 5 years and you're not going to go to the next level. It's your identity was built around that, being an athlete. Everything went into that, even though, yes, you're going to college and you're getting a degree, but you're still so focused on performing the best you can as an athlete that it's just really, it's difficult to then transition and say, well, I didn't have these internships. I didn't have, my grades could be good, could not be good, but I didn't build those relationships with companies and all that kind of stuff. So what do I even do? And I think that's where you see a lot of athletes, struggle a little bit with, with that transition. So I don't know that I blame the coaches, because I get their side of it. I mean, they're always on the hot seat. But I think it leads back to, especially in this day where NIL and, everyone's talking about the transfer portal, the money flowing into college athletics, is at the core, you still need to develop people, right? And you can develop people athletically and as an individual at the same time. I mean, they're athletes. We can handle it. So I would just say I wish there was more of that going on. And even, especially in today with some of the athletes we work with, I mean, it is a business. Check that box, get it. But at the end of the day, you still need to develop these athletes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. There's more I want to talk about there, but there's actually something I'm curious about. You mentioned your 25 years in the financial advising, financial planning sector, primarily working with athletes, often who were recovering from not great financial situations. Most coaches aren't going to find themselves necessarily working with an athlete in those situations, but a lot of coaches do find themselves engaging with, working with athletes who have made poor choices in some area of their life, right? And have to deal with the ramifications of those decisions, etc. I just love to hear more about what that was like working with athletes that were in that tough spot. What did you find worked as far as your ability to build trust with them and help lead them to a better spot?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think where a lot of advisors go in and they tell the athletes, even some of the financial literacy, programs that go around and talk to athletic departments and teams and all that, they talk at the athletes, right? And you've got so many different people from so many different backgrounds that some are, more advanced in kind of their financial knowledge and some aren't, but very few have a lot of trust with whoever's coming in, and especially when you're talking about stuff that as a 18, 19, 20-year old kid, even if I'm getting paid right now through NIL, I don't really care about, right? Like, I'm focused on these other things. And so I think it's where the track that I took, and I think the reason I had success is because we were really focused on, all right, let's develop that kind of mindset or the psychology around money. What are the attitudes and behaviors on why these decisions were made? And if we can draw that back then into, all right, well, you acted this way with your money, but you are really trying to accomplish this one thing. What is that one thing? Why is that important to you? And now we can kind of reverse engineer a plan on, well, what makes the most sense to do with your money? And who was it? Simon Sinek came up with the why, right? I think at the end of the day, it's that why. Like, why do you want to, continue to get beat up in football, or, and spend all this time and energy and punishment, right? Even if you don't, I mean, most athletes, it was funny, didn't really enjoy the game, but they enjoyed the financial resources that would come from the game. And so it was really that sort of mental aspect and coming up with the why behind why they were making those decisions and the ultimate purpose, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. I think there's something there for anybody that's leading anyone. Can you actually distill it and drill down to what matters to you and what's important to you, and how can we help you get there? I'm guessing most of those athletes like, I want to change my family tree financially, right? I want to leave money or I want to help my parents, my kids, etc. It's like, now, like, we can move somewhere now that you can articulate your why this money matters to you. Let's move you there with some better habits, etc., some education, those pieces, etc.
100%. There's a
Yeah.
good story of one of the combine NFL combine guys that we work with, right? Who ended up going fairly high in the second round. That wasn't where he was projected, but through some of the work that we do in that space, we identified, like, and some of his coaches and teammates didn't know this, but he grew up homeless. He living in a car, didn't have meals all the time, right? Throughout high school, and so he went through some stuff, right? Well, then his sister had a baby, and so he was an uncle, right? His nephew was born, and his whole purpose, which he was able to boil down to, was, I want my nephew to have the childhood that I didn't have, right? And being able to figure that piece out, now he's willing to put up with a lot, right? It's not it's how can that then guide me in the decisions that I make, and that can help limit some of the bad decisions, and magnify and emphasize some of the good decisions throughout, not just financially, but throughout the whole career.
Coaches, I wanted to take a quick 60-second timeout to tell you about 3 things. Number 1, if you want a free PDF of detailed notes on this episode or any episode of the podcast, subscribe to the Better Coaching newsletter for free today. Number 2, I want to invite you to join the Better Coaching community. It's a free online community of over 500 like-minded coaches from across sports. It's a place to interact with and learn from other coaches. We also have tons of free resources in the classroom section on leadership, culture, practice design, and more. Number 3, this podcast is fueled by RYG Athletics. RYG Athletics is a proud provider of Nike sports camps. We're always looking to add awesome coaches to our network of camp directors. If you're interested in learning more about this paid opportunity and becoming one of our Nike sports camp directors, we'd love to hear from you. You can find links to more information on all 3 things in the show details. Now back to the show. Oh, well, that's such a powerful story. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think obviously we're going to talk about it, and I'm guessing it's a reason for what you guys launched at Success Beyond Game Day. But like you're talking about there, obviously specifically financially, like many athletes, they finish their careers. Maybe it's at the end of high school, maybe it's at the end of college, maybe it's at the end of a pro career, and they're just not ready for life after sport. And you talked about it with your experience. Your identity is wrapped up in being an athlete, and it can be all consuming, etc. But as coaches, and like you're talking about, like there should be a responsibility, a burden on us to prepare our athletes for real life. So I'd love for you to talk about more about why did you guys start Success Beyond Game Day? What is it exactly? And then how are you guys trying to move the ball down the field on that, preparing athletes for after sport?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great, so, Sam and I both former, she played softball at Pitt. I was a baseball player, and we lived that, right? We lived that life. And so we said, we had people tell us throughout sports, and when we transitioned out and all that, hey, you're an athlete. Companies want to hire you because you're an athlete. And so that's great, right? That makes you feel pretty good. But what is it about me being an athlete? And the generic, well, you're a team player, you have leadership, all those sorts of things. But that's not necessarily unique to me being an athlete. I mean, there's people that don't play sports that have all those skill sets too. And so what is it specifically that I bring to the table, skill sets that I've cultivated through athletics, in order to set myself up and then be able to articulate that to a future employer on why I'm a better fit, even though I may not have the internship experience and I've spent my time, on the field and in the gym. Why am I a better fit than this person that may have a little bit larger resume? And so it started from really that seed of how can we get very, very detailed and specific in the skill sets that these athletes bring to the table. And so that was kind of the genesis of it, right? And then at the same time, if we could use that same data to help coaches coach better, recruit the right people, win more, then we have a higher likelihood of actually developing the individual, because both sides are winning, right? You're able to kind of use a tool to accomplish multiple things, versus what we saw in the athletic space is, here's a tool, it's going to impact this one piece of what you do, and nothing else, right? And so so that's kind of where it started. And so what we said is, all right, well, how do we map out and identify key behaviors, right, that athletes bring in athletics, but also apply to life? And so we did all the research on all these different assessments that are out there, and When we boiled it down, a lot of these, whether it's the DISC or the Myers-Briggs or a lot of these, they were based on an athlete's interpretation of their behavior, and it was very subjective. And I could think as an athlete that I'm good at one thing, but the reality is nobody else in the world thinks that, right? Those were really 50 to 60% accurate, and it didn't really give us the specifics that we were looking for, right? So we looked at each other and we said, hey, I can't go in and talk to a bunch of athletes and tell them they have these skill sets and have a 50-50 shot of being right. I mean, we're going to lose 100% of our credibility really, really quick right there. And so what we did is we helped build out an assessment that's based on values, right? Because values, you either think it's okay to rob a bank or you don't. There's not a ton of gray area built within that. And so the values are more reliable, and there's all these different studies and science developed on how and what you value can determine with high 92% plus percent accuracy the behaviors that you bring to the table. And we were able to start measuring behaviors like how strategic and visionary are you? Can you come up with plan A, but then also the contingency plans, B, C, if things don't go right? If given a game plan or given a plan, do you know what you have to do specifically in your position to execute that game plan? Or do you need a coach to kind of pull you aside and explain this is what you have to do? If things aren't going right on the field or off the field, can you adjust and maintain high quality performance without, again, having to be pulled off and explained and walked through and handheld on what's going on? Can you focus in high stress, high energy environments? So Super Bowl Sunday, you're out there. Is the game and the magnitude of the stage going to limit your performance, or can you block all that out? What type of a teammate are you? Are you coachable? Will you follow directions? How do you manage locker room and personal stress? And so 27 different kind of performance behavior based indicators that we came up with and were able to measure, again, with extreme accuracy. And so when we saw that, we said, we've got something. Coaches can use this to map and really figure out the core mindset. Do people align with the program culturally? Do my coaches align with me? Do I have kind of that gold standard player that I've coached in the past, and how does this person measure up to that from a mindset, mental standpoint? And then we can also take that to the athletes on the development side and say, look, I could look you right in the eyes and say, Luke, you're really strong at coming up with a strategy and then executing on that strategy, and you create kind of that inclusive work environment. And now you can go to an employer in an interview and you can say, they say, hey, why are you the right person for the job? And you can say, I've got this job seems to align with these behaviors, and I know I'm very, very strong in these behaviors. And now you're on a complete different conversation scale with that employer. It's not the, what did you eat for breakfast and the, fluffy stuff. I mean, you're talking about actual skill sets, and that conversation goes somewhere different. And on the flip side, if you're lower in some of these behaviors or these mindset behaviors that we measure, now we have a specific development path that we can put together to help you improve to then accomplish some of the goals that you have. And so that was a lot, but it was, how can we use this tool then to develop the athlete as an individual, also athletically, but then have coaches use it as a tool to get the right people in that fit with the program.
Yeah, that's so important. Is the assessment is a questionnaire that the athletes are filling out, or are there other components to it?
Yeah, it takes about 10 minutes to do. It's a link that they get, and basically all you do is rank, in order of most valuable or of value to you to least, right? Certain situations and scenarios and all that, so it takes about 10 minutes, and then boom, we can take that and develop. I mean, there's so many different things we can do with it, but yeah, it's pretty quick for the athlete to take.
That's so interesting. I'm guessing a lot of the coaches that you work with are using that in recruiting as well.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that it's being used. So recruits, think about, um, I'm a Tennessee guy, right? That my wife went to Tennessee, and so we follow that football program. And they had a quarterback last year, which did well, took them to the playoffs, but then transferred out, right? And so went to a new school, and kind of played about the same as he did the previous year when he was at Tennessee. And so, is there something, right? And I don't know him, or I don't know anything about him except he got us to the playoff last year, right? But is there something where, yes, 5-star coming out of high school, in the decision making process when he's on the field, that doesn't translate to that Power 4, or beyond program? And is it fixable if it doesn't, right? Is it something that we can improve on enough to get him to perform and create a exact development plan for that, right? So we can use it for that sort of purpose on, yes, fast, has a good arm, all that, but can they actually execute like we need them to execute? Um, Having that gold standard of, we all had, I mean, most of the guys in the NFL weren't, 5-star, 4-star, um, high school kids. They were under recruited, but they developed into an NFL athlete, right? And so, how can we take what their mental makeup is and set that as, yeah, and measure that just like we do a 40-yard dash and other statistics, right? And so, being able to do some of that sort of thing. But then map out the entire team and see, all right, well, where is my defense compared to my offense? And what do we need in each position based on my coaching style and the system that I run, and how can we measure if we're actually bringing in the right recruit, and then how do we have the coaches work with these athletes to then maximize their potential, right? So there's a whole communication aspect that we can pull from it. And, we've seen those athletes, especially, if you've coached or been around coaching, little league and that sort of thing, where you're telling them one thing and someone comes in and just says it a little bit differently. And even though I've been telling them the same thing for the last 3 years, like all of a sudden it clicks. So if we can create more opportunities for it to click inside that athlete, now we can actually tap into some of that talent that maybe isn't being utilized. And then just looking from, what are the behaviors from a cultural standpoint that we want at our program, right? Everyone's got the pillars of, this is what we stand for. It's always painted on the wall in the locker room. And that's really what do you fit this as a recruit, right? Well, if we can actually identify the behaviors that go into those pillars, well, we can tell you if the recruit aligns with that or not. And so maybe you get a couple 3-stars, but at the end of the day, they end up performing like 4 stars, 5 stars, and you're not caught up in that, just the physical talent aspect. So yeah, a ton on recruiting, and really being able, and when you get enough, some of the programs, we've got enough data now where we can say, hey, these guys that are on the roster all have these characteristics. The guys that transferred out or recruits that you didn't offer don't have these, right? Or they're at this score or below. And we can come up with a pretty convincing case of, you probably just shouldn't have taken that athlete, right? They're a better fit somewhere else. And so if we can minimize mistakes in the recruiting process, then again, that just helps the coach, win and recruit better, and at the end of the day, more money and all that kind of stuff. But then their development
Yeah,
people can use
absolutely.
it to actually develop the person, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm even thinking, for a junior high or a high school coach, how do you, that has to run tryouts every year, and you get to evaluate these athletes for maybe a couple hours on the field, and how do you create something that that can give you some insight into this area, like a 10 question quiz or something that tries to figure out, hey, do these kids align with these values or have a mindset that's going to help them succeed? And obviously that younger level, there's so much we don't know about them, and they're developing and changing and trying to figure out what they do believe and value. But yeah, I think there's something there as far as just even coaches considering, how do I evaluate through more than just the physical lens of what I can see them do on the field or the court?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting you say that. So we do work with kind of what I call that elite high school athlete, and I define that by they're going to play D1 somewhere, right? And so they're going to go on to the next level, and there's really what we find is from that athlete, there is kind of a craving for mental performance, and we've got athletes that you wouldn't think that are leaning into that and really developing from a mental performance standpoint. But then you have to think a lot of them are being recruited. And we've got this thing now, the transfer portal, which has flooded the market, right? We've got the same supply of scholarships, but now we have increased demand on those scholarships from people that are older, more experienced, more mature, bigger, stronger, all that kind of stuff, because they've been at that college level. And so how do you then compete with that if you're a high school athlete and the coach needs to win now, right? And so it's some of what we do in the NFL is helping these kids explain who they are, the interview process, right? How do you explain who you are, what talent you bring to the organization from a mindset, mental standpoint, so that the coach then says, all right, well, I've got this kid that maybe transferred once or twice, and yeah, they're a little bit bigger, but man, I know a lot more about this athlete than than this transfer kid, right? I feel like they just align with the program better, and I can work with them for a longer period of time. So now I'm willing to invest a little bit more time with that athlete. And so how do you get that opportunity, right? Just like with our NFL guys in the combine work, it's how do you explain to the GM, to the coach, to the scouts, who you are that separates you from everybody else that's saying largely the exact same stuff you are, right? So how do you separate yourself in those interviews, in the recruiting, the scouting process, so that you maybe get an opportunity that you might not have gotten before?
Yeah, that's powerful. I think one thing I would just say in response to that is, I think it's important that coaches just consider taking the time and creating the space to have some of these conversations with their athletes, regardless of what level you coach. If you're coaching high school athletes and most of them, their career is ending, like, hey, you should take 30 to 60 minutes every year to talk about these things. And hey, how do you guys take your experiences as an athlete and help you get into school or go through interview? Those things are important. We want to help them actually be ready for real life. The other thing I think is worth pulling out of what you just said is, you talked about how many athletes are actually hungry for, bought into the mental performance side of performance. And I'll just say that we experienced the exact same thing. So at the Nike sports camps we run every summer, a lot of our camps have like a dedicated classroom portion of the day where we do leadership, mindset, and then sport specific teaching and skills. And I'm always blown away by how into the mental performance side of things even young athletes are, that 10 to 14-year-old range. And like, we ask them at the beginning of the week, we're like, hey, talk to us. How much of your sport do you think is mental? How much of your performance? And they always share really high percentages. Yeah. And we're like, yeah, like, you recognize it too. So let's try to figure out how can you grow there so that when the moment's big, you can be at your best. And so I think that's also worth pulling out and highlighting for coaches. Like, if you're willing to engage your athletes in this in an authentic, meaningful way, I think you'll be very surprised by how receptive most of them are to it. Not all. There will be some that poo-poo it and they don't want it, etc. Also, often that will probably limit them,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But many athletes, and especially if you can get them away from the court in a calm environment and you can have some of these conversations or even share clips of athletes talking about it that, they look up to, it hits different when a 14-year-old basketball player is watching LeBron talk about mental performance or Steph talk about it. It's like, hey, those guys at the top recognize this. You as a 14-year-old, yeah, it matters for you too. So I think it's just really important that as coaches and people leading athletes in this space, we're willing to go into that with them, even if it's not something that, we experienced as an athlete, because it wasn't something that was as big when I was playing sport as I think it is now, right? Where coaches were focusing on it as much. Some were, but many weren't. And it was kind of viewed in a different light. So I think it's really important just to, yeah, pull that out that
Yeah.
we got to be willing to engage those conversations with
Yeah,
them.
you said two things there, right? The first, so imagine being able to, I think a lot of coaches shy away from it because it's up until being able to define, measure against it, which athletes do all the time, right? You need to get bigger. Well, what does that mean? You need to put on 10 more pounds of muscle. All right. And now I have a goal. I have a set number that I can work towards. But up until being able to define and measure that, it was all very arbitrary, right? Work on these sorts of things. We weren't able to get specific. And sports is about specifics, right? I mean, the win, putting the golf ball in the hole a millimeter to the left and, you lose the Masters, right? Or, the jump shot or whatever. It's all about very very specific sorts of things, and so being able to now say, hey, these are the areas where we can really help you develop because this is where you're lacking a little bit. Now we can and other and coaches and all that can put together programs that matter, and we can then measure progress as a result of it. But then the authenticity, right? I think that's the biggest piece. I mean, you look at Sam and I mean, we look a lot alike, and we work with people that, come from very, very different backgrounds that buy into us because for us, it's not about like, I don't care where you go as an athlete. I don't care if you become a Hall of Famer, if you go to play D1, if you make billions of dollars playing, it doesn't matter to me. That's not why I'm investing in you, right? I'm investing in you because at some point that sports career is going to be done and you're going to go through the exact same thing that I went through. And you need to be prepared for that because you can use your sport. We hear all the time, the athletes being used by their sport. Well, we can flip that. You can use your sport to really accomplish what you want out of life, and it starts now. You don't have to wait to develop that. And if you do that now, it's not only going to help you after sports, but it's also going to help you do better in while you're still playing.
That's so good. I want to ask a maybe more practical question. Let's say coaches use your assessment or even just from their own observation experience working with an athlete. They've got an athlete who really struggles with adversity, right? Not uncommon in sport. When it gets hard, their performance suffers, they shut down, they explode, right? There's a myriad of responses that can happen, but it's very clear to that coach this athlete struggles with adversity. Where do coaches go from there? How do we actually help them move towards a place where they are mentally tough enough to experience the adversity and still perform at a high level?
Yeah, I'd say using the assessment, we can identify where that adversity is coming from. Is it in the locker room? Is it just they're not able to kind of process things going up quick? Is it personal stress that they can't handle? And so, if we can narrow in on where that adversity is coming from, then it's just like going to the doctor. I mean, if you have an elbow that hurts and you can point to the specific spot, well, then the doctor can come up with a regimen to improve that. But without the assessment, I think it's creating the environment. I mean, listen, this isn't anything that I came up with. I mean, you look at Michael Jordan and Kobe and Tom Brady. They all talked about this. It's how do you create the environment that they struggle in when it doesn't matter? So the practice situations to where it's you take them on offense, and if they're winning, right? They're scrimmaging their, let's use basketball. They're in a scrimmage and they're up 20 points. How do you take them, put them on the team that's losing, but also put a consequence on it to where everyone's got to run if team B loses this game, right? So you create that in a comfortable environment so you can start working through some of it, in order to then, when it gets to that big stage, it's not new. They've been through this before, and so you can maybe minimize some of it right there without being able to drill down into this is where it's coming from. A lot of times they just have the wrong people around them, right? The circle that they keep and there's studies on that, but the circle they keep just isn't the circle that they need to keep, right? And so a lot of times it's that. So how then do you put them around people that are going to help them think a little bit differently, that they respect because they've been through that walk? This is where you can start integrating alumni and whether it's even if it's at the youth level, athletes that have went on to play Division 1. That is a hero to a lot of these guys. I can use this sport to get there, and so it doesn't have to be a pro person, but it's someone that played for you that can help them, understand and give them advice. And
That's good. I think there's two things that stood out. One, we have got to create practice environments that actually elicit the similar emotional responses or emotions that they experience in competition. Like if there isn't competition in your practice, they're not really going to get the opportunities to experience adversity and struggle in a place where, yeah, it's safe to experience it here. Now we can learn from it. One of the things that has stuck with me, I can't remember who shared it with me. It might have been Doug Lamont, but just even the ability for a coach to then engage with that and say, hey, I'm glad that this happened here in practice. So that it doesn't happen, we go out and we compete, right? Like you lost it in practice. Okay, what are you going to do when this happens in a game? And I think that's an important space to create.
Well, that was created.
Because,
I mean, the Nike icon, right? Jordan. I mean, his practice. He always said the game was easy to him because the practices were so hard that when he got to the game, it was nothing.
Yeah, totally. I want you to say a little bit more too about what you were sharing there towards the end of that, as far as how, as coaches, when we're leading young people, maybe high school, college, even the professional level, I'm sure, and we have an athlete who it's very clear is being influenced by the wrong voices. Maybe it's parents, maybe it's friends, who knows, even more complicated at the college and professional levels when money is involved and all of that. But I've seen it plenty at the high school, junior high levels, right? An athlete has the wrong voices or voices that aren't serving them well. How, as coaches and leaders, do we engage with those athletes well to help them try to recognize that and change?
Wow, that's a tough one, right? Because that's also a dangerous, especially if it's family and that sort of thing. But I've seen it a ton too, where you have athletes that are in high school now, and because of the sport they play and the talent they have, they're getting offered a ton of money. I think it comes down, and we to bring the word back up, authenticity, right? I mean, what they're experiencing most of the time is people care about them because they're good at this sport, and that's really where and so you just have to get to understand them and their goals, right, outside of their sport. And it takes a while sometimes. I mean, I'm thinking of a couple. We've got some very high profile basketball players that I work with individually that it took probably 4 or 5 times sitting down with them for a couple hours for them to actually identify what at the end of the day they were trying to accomplish, what they really wanted right out of life. And when you understand that, now you can again reverse engineer. Well, you did this. How does that align with that goal, right? And just ask the question, right? It's not. I think we preach too much at athletes, and And that's not a conducive, right? I mean, I wouldn't learn that way. But if you're making me think and teaching me how to think through the situation, then I think that's how we do it. It seems to work well because they know that, again, we care about them. I don't really care what they do with their sport. I hope they use their sport to accomplish really what they want out of life. And if we can help narrow that down as early as possible, then whether it's in sports or something else, they're going to be successful. So I'd say
Yeah, I love that.
that's kind of point one on that. But then it's just showing up. There's stats on. This is one of my favorite. If you they did a study on performance in the corporate workspace, right? And they said if you sit within 25 feet of a top performer, your skill set staying the same, right? You don't get any better, any smarter, any faster, any stronger. Your skill set stays the same, but you're within 25 feet of a top performer, your performance increases 15% just by being in proximity to that person. And so on the flip side, though, if you're within 25 feet of a poor performer, your skill set, your everything staying the same, your performance decreases 30%. And so
That's
it's
wild.
crazy, right? And so, but look at it across the board, and let's use Jordan again. I mean, he made other people's careers because he was who he was. You didn't have to like him. You didn't have to. It didn't matter to him. He was going to win, and he was going to show you how to win. And now you've got guys that have rings that maybe never should have had rings that are talked about as legends that had they not been in that environment never would have never you just would never have heard of them.
There's a couple things that stood out. One, you were talking about still getting to the core of what this athlete wants, and you just talked about you got to listen to them. You got to ask them some questions and listen. We've got to stop talking and let them share. They've got to figure out what the vision is for their life, and then we can just ask them questions to figure out. They're going to see really quickly, wait, this is my vision and my behaviors don't align with that. So what's got to change? And I think it's so important that as coaches, we get good at asking questions and listening. And I think that's so key. And then it is so fascinating, and coaches, I think, see it consistently, like you were sharing there, when athletes get around the right people that will raise their performance. It does nothing but serve them well. And even for coaches too, I think there's a takeaway there of like, hey, are you around good coaches? They're going to elevate you. Are you learning from someone that's going to help you become a high performing coach, etc.? Or are you in a place where the coach leading your program is not a high performer and you're not growing? Well, it's probably time for you to go somewhere else. And those can be hard choices, but I think that's worth just highlighting. The other thing I want to hit on and get your perspective on is, as coaches, we've talked a lot about the importance of trying to help athletes be ready for real life beyond their sport. But you mentioned at the beginning with your own situation and just working with athletes in general, many of them are not thinking beyond sport. It's right here, right now. I'm going to play Division I, I'm going to play professionally, etc. That's all they seemingly care about. And as coaches, if we're really serious about being transformational leaders in their life, leaving them better as players and peoples, we also recognize that there's a burden on us to help them become ready for real life, because the ball will stop bouncing. Like, sport will end for them at some point. And so I guess my question is, how as coaches can we do that, prepare them for life outside of sport, while not trying to send the message of like, hey, I don't believe you can go to the next level, right? It's not, because I think athletes might feel like, oh, they don't believe I can make it here. It's like, no, we believe in your ability, and at some point it's going to end. We want you to be ready. How do we do that? Believe in athletes and their potential as an athlete, and make it apparent and put emphasis on, we've also got to get you ready for real life.
Yeah, I think now it's easier than ever. Simply because you have NIL and and to me, it's not NIL like getting paid just to be on the team. It's the kind of the true version of NIL. But to me, the benefit of that was previously, if an athlete, connected with an alumni, they had to keep that like, on the down low, right? It was, yeah, we're going to meet at Starbucks in the back corner with the lights off, so like nobody thinks that you're getting improper benefits and all that type of stuff. So how do you leverage what NIL has allowed you to now do? Again, take the money out of it. It's the building of relationships. It's making new connections. It's deepening relationships. How can you use your platform to get better? And because the better you do, the higher you go, you're going to be able to get bigger and bigger relationships. Your platform now gives you access to people that you probably shouldn't have access to. Business leaders, CEOs, big time boosters, people that have been extremely successful. And so the better you do on the field, the more of those relationships you can build and leverage when you need it, right? So it's how do you do both at the same time and learn from these people and build these relationships? And I think to me that was the best part of NIL is it took those restraints off, so that you could really leverage your position as an athlete to build those relationships and benefit from them, now and in the future, and at the same time get pushed to develop and get to that pro level if that's what you want. And they're not mutually exclusive. I think you can do both at the same time, and the environment now allows you to do that without having to worry about the NCAA knocking on the door and taking away your scholarship and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's good. I'm also curious. Obviously, it's at the college level. Even in some states, it's trickling down to the high school level. I'm sure it's going to continue as far as NIL goes and athletes getting compensated. I think some, sorry, I think something that's hard for coaches to navigate in that space is, as coaches, our mindset is the team and the team first and all about the team. And it can probably feel like for a lot of coaches, man, athletes are just concerned about themselves and their brand. And so I guess my question is, how can coaches recognize that, like, this is a real piece? It's not going away, and it's not all bad. It's not all good, right? There's nuance there. But how can coaches navigate their responsibility to the team first and recognizing, trying to create space for, hey, this is a real part of what athletes care about, what can benefit them financially in the present and the future? I think there's just that tension probably for a lot of coaches is, hey, this is supposed to be about the team. I'm trying to make it about the team, but it feels like my athletes are maybe primarily focused with their own brand or their individual accolade, success, etc.
Yeah, and this is where I sometimes get into trouble with coaches and all that kind of stuff, because I'm very player focused, right? And I think if you set up the environment to where, yeah, being all about the money is the priority, then that's who you're gonna attract. You're gonna bring in those types of people. I think there's a lot of cases, more so than those chasing money, but that's the sexy story right now, right? Is they're chasing money. That's all they want. That's the narrative. And if we start operating by that narrative, then we just go down a road that we don't want. If you look at the top programs out there, right? Football, we're middle of football season, playoff, is going to be announced. You look at like a Georgia, you look at now in Indiana, in Ohio State, in Oregon. Yeah, they've got a lot of money coming in, but you also have actual development of these athletes that's going on. They figure out what the core of that athlete is. How can we help you accomplish that in light of this area? So how can you still be a coach and do what you need to do, and still have the NIL? Because you're right, it's not going away. It's going to stick around. But what is your environment? What is your culture about? If it's about the money, then that's who you're going to attract. And if it's about development, then that's who you're going to. Just because you have the money doesn't mean you have to spend it. right? Just because it's there. I mean, there's athletes that are taking a lot less money because there's opportunity at this institution versus this institution. So I think this narrative that that's all they're focused on is false. Again, it's the sexy story right now, but you've got a lot of coaches that are very heavy development of that athlete focused, and you're going to come in and you're going to do things our way, and this is how we're going to build you up and help you get and become the best version of yourself possible. They're doing that and navigating the NIL space, and so. Where I do our shameless plug is if you can identify that in the recruiting process, if you're bringing the right kid in or not, because the recruiting process is fast, especially with the transfer portal. You don't have time like you used to really get to know these athletes, and so if you can get a glimpse into how they're gonna behave in their brain, then you can work and bring that right fit for the program in.
That's good. I think the biggest takeaway for me there is the coaches, you've got to get clear on your vision for your program and your values. You have to know what matters if you want to attract the right kind of people and keep the right kind of people. I think that's for anything in life, business, sport, etc. That clarity is so
it's
key.
tough, right? Because the pressure on you to win has never been greater because the narrative of, well, we can just go and buy these players and look at these other programs that are heavily, transfer portal and spending a lot of money. They're winning and that's what they're doing. But you don't really get a look under the hood of how they're actually doing it, how they're actually selecting the right individuals. And so it's if we allow ourselves to be driven by the narrative, then that's what we're going to create. And it'll eventually cycle itself out. I mean, just think of how NIL has changed since it was first announced, 4 years ago now. It'll work itself out. But at the core, it's still the fundamental things that you always did as a coach. That's how you're going to build winning teams. It's the development of the athlete. It's getting the right athlete in there. I mean, that's how these teams keep winning. It's not just about the money.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, Ryan, this has been awesome. Before you go, I've got 3 quick rapid fire questions for you. You are coaching people. You're coaching athletes. You're coaching coaches. You've been coaching athletes in the financial area for a long time. So I would love to hear your answers to these questions. The first one is this. The most fun part of coaching is?
Getting to relive my youth, being around the youth, the energy, and just being able to make a difference.
Yeah, I love it. I wish I would have known blank before my first coaching experience.
Oh, man. I wish I would have known that you don't always have to have all the answers before it's okay to not know something and to circle back and give someone the right answer versus a answer.
That's good. And the last one, I know I'm successful as a coach when guys
give me hugs. You get the support, you get the, being in here's a quick, I know it's rapid fire, but I've recently got into working with a couple NBA athletes, right? And that was from being introduced by someone that they knew that I had worked with. And so knowing that the need is out there, but to have someone have that vote of confidence and say, hey, they really helped me, you need to at least have that conversation. That's when you really won.
Yeah, that's special. Well, Ryan, this has been awesome. Before we wrap it up, share with people where they can connect with you, learn more about Success Beyond the Game, or anything else you'd like to pass on.
X Ryan at SBGD, same thing on Instagram. We put out a lot of stuff. Email successbeyondgameday.com is a good place to start. But just connect with us. Pretty accessible. Both Sam and I are very accessible. And we look forward to it.
Amazing. Ryan, thanks for your time and thanks for sharing your experience and your knowledge with coaches. Coaches, thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. To learn more or connect with the guests from this episode, check out the links in the show details. And if you want a free PDF of detailed notes on this episode or any episode of the podcast, subscribe to the Better Coaching newsletter today for free. We'd also love to see you in our free Better Coaching online community. It's a great place to learn and connect with like-minded coaches from across sports. And finally, if you're interested in becoming one of our Nike Sports Camp directors, we'd love to talk with you about this paid opportunity. You can head to the show details for links to learn more about all of those things. Thanks for listening to the podcast.